Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to show you how a Grandmaster rated over 2600 just gets completely crushed in only 16 moves. It's not something you see every day, and I can guarantee you will enjoy this game. So many spectacular tactical ideas in only 16 moves. Let's have a look. The game was played in the Baku Open tournament, which is just currently going on. It's a game with the white pieces playing Balayeva, a woman grandmaster rated around 2300, 22 years old. And she played against well-known grandmaster Barakoti Harsha from India, who is just 1 year older than her, but has a significantly higher rating with 2600 plus. And let's just get started. It starts with the move e4, c5, and now the move c3. This is the Sicilian Alapin. White is planning to get the center with the move d4. And in order to prevent white from occupying the center, the two main moves here are either to play knight f6, attacking the pawn on e4, or the move played in the game d5, putting pressure on the pawn on e4. White decides to take, e takes d5, and now queen takes d5. So of course the queen has been brought into play, which is actively placed, but you know that if you bring the queen out early, that can also backfire. White played the move d4, occupying the center anyway, and well, black has a lot of different ways of countering the center. The main options are knight f6 or knight c6 or even the move e6, but Barakoti goes for the move g6. Interesting idea with the point of developing the bishop via g7. And this is still pretty well known, although it's considered to be a sideline meeting the Sicilian Alapin. Knight f3, bishop g7, and a typical idea here in this opening, since white has already placed its pawn on c3, the knight is not able to get to that square itself, but will be developed via a3. And this is a very interesting idea because normally you're advised not to develop your knight to the side of the board, but in this system it does make a lot of sense because there are many ideas. First of all, the knight may come either to b5 or c4, but it also does support white from placing his bishop on c4. So the knight itself, it's not doing too badly. The main continuation here for black, which was not played in the game, but I would like to show you one very nice little trap. It's the move c takes d4, capturing the pawn in the center. And now two options. First option is to play knight b5, with the idea to give a fork on c7. And since black is busy dealing with that threat, white will get a chance to take the pawn on d4 anyway, with quite a nice position. But the other tricky move here is bishop c4. Developing the bishop with gain of time, attacking the queen. Queen goes, for instance, to e4. And this feels a little annoying, because the queen is giving check. But here you go bishop e3. If you see this for the first time, you think, what is going on here? You give away the bishop. But after d takes e3, capturing this bishop, there's bishop takes f7. Beautiful trick. King takes f7, runs into knight g5 with a knight fork. You're winning the queen. If king goes away, you take it. And apart from capturing the bishop, you could play king f8, but then there's queen d8 check, forcing black to take anyway, and then anyway, you're taking the queen on the next move. So this is a tricky idea. After bishop e3, black can absolutely not take the bishop, should play a move like knight h6 to develop the knight and protect the pawn on f7 and get ready to castle. And well, white is going to take on d4. Interesting game, both sides have some pieces which are looking a bit strange. Look at both knights being standing at the side of the board, but position is more or less equal. Back to the game, because apparently black didn't want to go for this main option and instead decided to play the move knight h6 immediately. So there's something to say for this move, of course, as now the pawn is defended. Also, the bishop has still an open diagonal. But how is white going to take advantage of it? Well, once again, there are many interesting moves, like knight b5, or instead of knight b5, bishop c4 is a good move. But Balayeva decided to take the pawn on c5. It's also a principled move in the sense that black could have captured on d4, which he didn't do so. And now, typical choice here for black. Are you going to exchange queens? so that white is no longer allowed to castle? Or are you going to take the pawn back on c5? Well, if you take on d1, go for the exchange of queens, there are these ideas for white, for instance, to if black tries to regain the pawn, to play knight b5, you have a knight fork on c7, you go away with your king, and after knight c7, rook b8, for instance, bishop takes h6, developing an undeveloped bishop by trading it off instantly, and then eventually you get this chance to support your pawns with the move b4. White is a pawn up, and it's not clear if black is going to have sufficient compensation. And therefore, black decided to take with the queen on c5. Material is even, but once again, another queen move. White goes bishop e3, developing with gain of time, and now after queen a5, big moment. White is for a choice here. Probably, objectively speaking, the best move is knight to c4, attacking the queen, and if you go queen c7 back, then queen d2 is a very nice move, attacking the knight on h6. The knight got a move, and now bishop f4, another move hitting the queen. Step by step, white's pieces are just improving. For instance, if the queen goes away, you can castle queenside, threatening checkmate on d8. Okay, black can deal with it by castling, but now the knight from c4 comes to e5. It's fantastically placed, and on the next move, white is about to get the bishop into the game. The rook can come to e1. All white's pieces are nicely placed, and I believe white is a bit better. But instead, the move knight b5 played in the game is also very tricky, and honestly, it paid off fantastically because Barracotti had absolutely no idea what to do here. So let's try to understand what is happening. The first move you would consider here as black is to castle. But the drawback of that move is there is this move b4, attacking the queen on a5. And the queen doesn't have many good squares to go. If it goes back to d8, you can just go for the exchange of queens, and you would love to play knight c7, trapping the rook in the corner, but there is still bishop takes c3. Right now that knight is protecting the pawn. Therefore, first you take that knight, bishop takes h6, bishop takes, and only now knight c7. Look, the rook is trapped, white is completely winning. So this is a serious problem. The queen doesn't have many good squares to go to. For instance, if you would play something like queen a6, I will play knight c7 anyway with a huge knight fork. Also, the bishop is even attacking the queen. But you got to calculate here. Bishop takes c3 comes with check. It looks a bit scary, but there is bishop d2, and the threat against the queen and rook is still there. If you do take on d2, you take back with the queen. Black's queen is under threat, and at the same time, this knight is also hanging. Black's final attempt to launch a counterattack with queen f6, hitting the rook on a1, can just be met by rook c1, and still black is unable to solve both problems as the rook and the knight are both hanging. So this is a very tactical line, and it explains very well what white is aiming for. So the big threat here is b4, and black has difficulties to retain control over the c7 square. Black played the move bishop d7, very understandable move, so that if white would play b4, the queen can safely drop back to d8 without allowing the exchange of queens and preventing the knight from entering on c7. But the next move by white was certainly overlooked by the strong Grandmaster. Can you see what white is going to play here? Pause the video if you want. But here the move queen d5 was played, and this is a fantastic resource. The queen is attacking the pawn on b7. That's one idea. But most importantly, if you try to defend it with the move bishop c6 and attack the queen, there is this move knight to d6 with check. It's a discovered check, and you're attacking the queen. If you take the knight, it's queen takes a5, and white is winning the queen. That's game over. So it's a double attack. You're hitting the pawn on b7, but at the same time, you're hitting the queen on a5 as well. Fantastic idea. For instance, if you would play something like bishop takes b5, I'm just going to take with the bishop back, and after king f8, we just take the pawn on b7, and it's absolutely game over. Also, castling kingside doesn't really offer black any salvation, because you're going to take the pawn on b7, but it's still a little tricky, because black has to do something about that rook on a8. But if you go knight c6 to protect that rook in the corner, there is queen takes d7 and the bishop is hanging. White is a piece up. The last attempt here is bishop c6. Instead, attacking the queen, and if the queen, for example, would take the pawn, then the knight on b5 is hanging, but the key move, it's queen to c7, as the knight protects the queen on c7. There's no time for black to take the knight because you're offering the exchange of queens. White is a very healthy pawn up and technically winning. After queen d5, black played here the move knight c6. It's the most logical move, and now the discovered check with the move knight d6 doesn't work, as the knight on c6 protects the queen on a5. So it looks as if black is doing reasonably okay, but there is this move. Bishop takes h6. Very important idea, removing a very important defender, because the point is that now after bishop takes h6, this bishop is no longer there to guard this square, and the knight comes into e5. And there are so many threats all of a sudden. First of all, if you do take knight takes e5, then this knight is no longer defending the queen, and white can still play knight d6 with a discovered check. E d6, queen takes a5, it's game over. But also, if you cannot take the knight, white is threatening to take on d7 or even on f7. How should black cope with the threats? If you do play bishop e6, which removes the threat on d7 and covers the threat on f7 at the same time, white has knight takes c6. It's a killer move. If you take the knight, it's queen takes c6 check, and on the next move you take the rook in the corner with check. And if you would take the queen, then that knight on c6 can also capture the queen on a5. So many tactical resources. Black is unable to hold the position together. Knight takes e5 doesn't work. Bishop e6 neither. One very tricky line I want to show you is castling queenside. Was also not played in the game. We are still analyzing what may have happened. Castling queenside is a very tricky move, giving up the protection of the pawn on f7. But if you would take that pawn with a knight fork, knight takes f7, look, there is this brilliant counter resource, bishop to g4. The rook hits the queen. After knight takes d8 is rook takes d8, hitting the queen. If the queen goes to a random square, let's say it goes to c5, then you have bishop to d2 and it's checkmate. So you see that also white's position is not without dangers at all. However, rather than taking that pawn on f7, I'm pretty sure that white would have found here the move queen to c5. That's a very nice move. You're moving the queen away from the d-file, and still knight takes f7 is a serious option. Also, the knight on c6 is pinned. So if you would, for instance, play a move like king b8 to prepare to take on e5 anytime soon, white can follow up here with the move b4, attacking the queen. And all of a sudden, this queen is in big trouble once again. If you go for the exchange of queens, white gladly accepts it, and then knight takes f7 is just decisive as the rooks are hanging. In case of queen a4, the queen is completely offside. It's no longer guarding the black king. And one very interesting mating attack motive here is knight takes c6. After bishop takes c6, looks as if black has solved all its problems, but there is queen e5 check. If the king goes to c8, it's queen c7 checkmate. In case of king a8, there is knight c7 check, king b8, knight a6 double check, king a8, and now queen b8, typical mating pattern. You're sacrificing the queen, and this is what we call a smothered mate. Beautiful line, white is just winning. Probably both players had seen all of this, and black decided to castle kingside instead. But then, you're protecting the pawn on f7, but the bishop on d7 can still be taken. White was happy to take knight takes d7, hitting the rook on f8 as well. You would love to play here rook fd8, and after rook d1, everything is still well covered. There's no good way to attack the knight on d7. If you try knight b8, setting up this pin on the knight, there is this discover check knight f6, brilliant resource. After ef6, you're able to take the rook on d8. Queen takes d8, rook takes d8, game over. Therefore, Black's final try here was rook 88. And now after rook 81, rook d1, knight b8 was played. So you understand the same idea with knight f6 no longer works because both the rook and queen are still protecting that rook on d8. And white has to be still very precise. And in fact, the knight can no longer be supported. If you do play queen takes b7, you are still a piece up. But after queen takes a2, it's not simple at all. There are still some developing issues for the white king. If you do take the rook, it's rook takes d1, king takes d1, and now queen b1 check. And white is unable to escape from the series of checks. So here, white has to just accept it's leading to a draw with a repetition of moves. So better you don't take the pawn on b7. Instead, white played very precisely the move b4, attacking the queen. Now it's game over. If you do take the knight on d7, it's b takes a5, rook takes d5, rook takes d5, and we do the material count, we see that white is just a full rook up. If the queen goes to a4, then we have a nice move, knight to c5. This is the main point of inserting the move b4. Now you're attacking the queen. After rook takes d5, knight takes a4, bishop still protects the knight, so no chance to regain the piece. After rook takes d1, king takes d1, white is still a very nice piece up. Therefore in the game, there followed the move queen a6, final try, but the simplest way here is knight takes b8. White resolves the pin along the d-file, and you see that it attacks the queen at the same time. After rook takes d5, knight takes a6, rook takes d1 check, king takes d1. You can take on a6, but still you are a piece down. And this is of course not a problem for Kalayeva to finish off the game. She's a full piece up. So therefore, after knight takes b8, black resigned. It rarely happens that a super strong Grandmaster is losing in only 16 moves. And what a game it was. So many tactical ideas. Let me briefly come back to the critical moment, which was already on move 9. We have seen that the move bishop d7 allowed white to play the move queen d5. And here the big problems started. What should black have done instead? To play the move knight d7 really requires a lot of calculation. It's a difficult move. It feels like anti-positional to get your knight into play. The knight is obstructing the bishop, and therefore also the rook on a8 is not able to join the game anytime soon. But you should understand that the threats are not that dangerous any longer. You can play queen d5, but you're no longer attacking the pawn on b7. So the only threat you have to solve is the move knight d6, but here after castling, black is absolutely fine. Queen d5 doesn't make sense. If you would play the move b4, the big difference now is that the queen is still able to drop back to d8 without allowing the exchange of queens. You're still covering the c7 square, all the threats have been stopped, and black has ideas to go knight f5 or maybe a6, and castling is just a game in which black is doing okay. But okay, anyway, we were treated by fantastic dynamical play of Balayeva, sorry. Her first name is Kanim Balayeva. And well, I hope we get to see many more spectacular games like this. Thanks for watching, give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you would like to see more miniatures like this. See you soon again.